Top 10 dark facts about psychology experiments you can't unsee. A dark room. Only the sound of a ticking clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Are you sure the human mind is safe? Or is it a playground for cruelty dressed up as science? Tonight, we dive into 10 psychology experiments so dark, you may never look at people the same way again. And fact number 1 will make you question if you ever truly have free will. 10. The Monster Study, 1939. Words can heal or destroy. In the so-called Monster Study, researchers divided orphan children into 2 groups. One group received kind encouragement for their speech. The other was mocked, punished, and told they were broken every time they stuttered. The result? Some children developed lifelong speech problems. Imagine entering the world already abandoned, only to be told your very voice was a defect. This was not an accident. It was calculated, written down, and justified as science. If words can cripple a life, what else can they do? Visual cue. A shadow of a child pressed against a wall. Giant clock hands slicing across the background. Punchline. Sometimes the sharpest scalpel isn't metal, it's the human tongue. 9. The Little Albert Experiment, 1920. Fear can be taught. Psychologists John Watson and Rosalie Rayner proved it on a 9-month-old baby. They showed him a white rat. At first, Albert laughed. Then they slammed a steel bar behind his head. Again and again. Albert quickly associated soft, furry creatures with terror. Soon, he cried not only at rats, but rabbits, dogs, even a man in a Santa Claus mask. His fear spread like wildfire across anything resembling fluff. This single experiment revealed conditioned fear. But Albert's fate? Lost in history, likely scarred for life. If fear can be installed like software, who's really holding the keyboard? Visual cue. A baby's toy rat falls to the ground, its shadow stretching into a looming monster as a clock ticks louder. Punchline. Santa Claus may deliver gifts, but science once delivered nightmares. 8. The Bobo Doll Experiment, 1961. Children watch, children copy. Albert Bandura placed kids in a room with adults. The adults attacked an inflatable clown doll named Bobo, punching, kicking, even using hammers. Later, the children entered the same room. They mimicked every violent move. The finding: aggression is contagious. When children see violence, they don't just remember it, they replicate it. The experiment changed how we view media, proving that brutality spreads like a virus. But the haunting part? It suggests that violence is less about instinct, more about imitation. If we are mirrors, what happens when the reflection is bloody? Visual cue. A child's hand clenches into a fist as a toy clown doll bounces back in slow motion, with a ticking clock behind them. Punchline. Apparently, monkey see, monkey do, except now the monkey has a hammer. 7. The Stanford Prison Experiment, 1971. A basement turned prison. Volunteers became guards or prisoners. Within hours, guards slipped into cruelty, humiliation, psychological torture, even staged riots. Prisoners broke down in tears. Some begged to quit. But the man running the study, Philip Zimbardo, didn't stop it. He watched as ordinary students became sadists. The experiment was scheduled for 2 weeks. It collapsed in 6 days. If power corrupts, how long before you become the villain? Visual cue. Guards in sunglasses loom over prisoners, while a clock on the wall spins its hands faster and faster. Punchline. Turns out evil doesn't need bars, just permission. 6. The Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes Experiment, 1968. After Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, teacher Jane Elliott divided her class by eye color.
Blue-eyed children were told they were smarter, better, superior. Brown-eyed children were shamed, excluded, punished. The results were instant. Children with blue eyes mocked and dominated their peers. The brown eyes slumped into silence and fear. This was a classroom, not a lab, but it revealed something terrifying. Discrimination doesn't take years to form. It can be created in minutes. If hate can be learned in a day, how long does it take to unlearn? Visual cue. A classroom clock ticks as one group of children sits elevated, the other group shrinking below. Punchline. Prejudice, it turns out, is as easy to teach as the alphabet. 5. The Milgram Obedience Study, 1961. Please continue. That was all it took. Volunteers believed they were shocking another person with increasing voltage for wrong answers. The screams were fake, but the volunteers didn't know. Most went all the way to what they thought was a fatal shock, just because a man in a lab coat told them to. Over 60% obeyed orders despite sweating, trembling, and begging to stop. If authority asked you to kill, would you? Visual cue. A trembling finger hovers over a glowing switch, the ticking clock now pounding like a heartbeat. Punchline. Apparently, electricity travels faster when morality takes the day off. 4. The Rosenhan Experiment, 1973. What happens when sanity is tested? Psychologist David Rosenhan sent healthy people into psychiatric hospitals. They claimed to hear a single word: empty. Once admitted, they behaved normally, but no doctor detected the lie. Instead, they were labeled schizophrenic and kept for weeks. Even when they acted healthy, staff saw their every action as symptom. Some stayed nearly 2 months before release. The lesson? Once labeled insane, escaping the label is almost impossible. If sanity is just perception, who gets to decide if you're normal? Visual cue. A locked hospital door with a giant clock above it, shadows pacing behind the glass. Punchline. Sometimes madness isn't in the patient, it's in the diagnosis. 3. The Learned Helpless Miss Dogs, 1967. Dogs in cages. Some could escape electric shocks by jumping a barrier. Others were trapped. Later, when freedom was possible, the trapped dogs didn't even try. They lay down, whimpering, accepting the pain. Psychologist Martin Seligman called it learned helplessness. The concept now explains why people in abusive relationships, toxic jobs, or cycles of poverty often stop resisting. What if you're not trapped, just trained to believe you are? Visual cue. A dog's silhouette beneath crushing clock hands, its body trembling, unable to move. Punchline. Sometimes the cage is in your head, not the room. 2. The Third Wave Experiment, 1967. In a California high school, Teacher Jones created the Third Wave. It was a movement to show students how fascism arises. Within 5 days, students wore uniforms, used salutes, and reported on peers. The classroom turned into an authoritarian cult almost overnight. When Jones revealed the truth that they had built their own dictatorship, many students were shaken, even in tears. If a dictatorship can grow in a week, how fast could it grow in your town? Visual cue. Students in rows raise identical salutes while a classroom clock looms overhead, ticking louder. Punchline. Apparently, tyranny only needs a school bell to ring on time. 1. The David Reimer Case, 1965. Bruce Reimer was born male, but suffered a medical accident. Psychologist Money convinced his parents to raise him as a girl. He claimed gender was entirely learned. The child, renamed Brenda, was forced into dresses and therapy sessions. The result was tragic. Brenda never felt right. Depression, confusion, and rejection followed. As a teen, Brenda transitioned back to male, taking the name David. But the psychological scars never healed. David later took his own life. If identity can be forced, what part of you is truly yours? Visual cue. A child's reflection in a cracked mirror. The clock's reflection warped and broken. Punchline. Sometimes the cruelest experiment is rewriting a person's entire life. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. Truth isn't always bright. Nothing more, nothing more. In the next 24 hours, try one small rebellion. Question a belief you've always accepted. Write it down. Notice how it feels. Thank you for watching. Sincerely yet coldly. And remember, if this was unsettling, the next truth will haunt you even more.